Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and this time we are talking about how to save money on Nintendo Switch 2. The Switch 2 and its games are more expensive than many people were expecting, and ever since the big Nintendo Switch 2 Direct presentation, there has been a lot of confusion and misinformation going around. Right now, many just don't have a great understanding of the overall pricing and features for Switch 2, so it's really hard to know just the overall value of the console right now. So today what I thought would be best would be to clarify everything that's going on regarding the pricing and all the features of the Switch 2 so people can better understand exactly what's going on so they can make a more informed decision on whether this console is worth it for them, but also go over a variety of different ways to save on Switch 2, so perhaps getting into this generation early on could be a little bit easier, especially considering these very challenging, more expensive times that we are all in. But before going forward, let me take this moment to point out that I am aiming to reach 50,000 subscribers by the time the Switch 2 launches on June 5th. So if you find yourself enjoying my content, I would appreciate it if you could subscribe and hit that notification bell. So let's first clear up the pricing situation. There are two different versions of the Switch 2. There's the normal version, which is priced at $449.99 USD, and then there is the bundle that includes a digital version of Mario Kart World that's at $499.99 USD. And what's neat about the bundle is that can help you to save 30 American dollars, because yes, Mario Kart World is 80 bucks, or more specifically, as we see here directly on Nintendo's website, it is selling for $79.99 USD. That is the suggested retail price. And so yes, what this means is that Mario Kart World, both digital and physical, is $80, or $79.99, at least here in the United States. And if you don't want to take my word for it, if you don't want to look at Nintendo.com or trust what I'm showing here from Nintendo.com, there are already different sites listing the physical version of Mario Kart World for, yes, $80 USD. And I'm really focusing on clarifying this right now, because a lot of people, since the Switch 2 Direct, have been going around saying that Nintendo Switch 2 games in general, the physical versions, are selling for $90 and the digital games are $80. And this is flat out 100% totally untrue. I think initially there was some confusion because people were looking at different currencies, and so some people saw currencies for different regions and misconstrued that as the American price. And the fact of the matter is, different parts of the world are going to have different price ranges. This is par for the course. But when speaking on the American price, it is $80 both digitally and physically, and Mario Kart World is the exception here. It is the only game that costs this much, but if you don't care for the physical version, you can save $30 by getting the digital version with the Switch 2. Mario Kart World is following up Mario Kart 8, which between both the Wii U and Switch versions has sold well over 70 million copies worldwide. Not counting Wii Sports, which is bundled with almost every single Nintendo Wii that came out back in the day, Mario Kart 8 is the best-selling Nintendo game of all time. And it may be the case that Mario Kart World has a higher price tag than normal, because Nintendo is planning to bundle this game a lot throughout the entire Switch 2 era, the same way they bundled Mario Kart 8 Deluxe a lot throughout the Switch 1 era. But not counting Mario Kart, it looks like Switch 2 games, a console that is 4K capable, just like the Sony and Microsoft consoles, the standard is appearing to be $70. So taking a look at the price for Donkey Kong Bonanza, the MSRP is $69.99 USD. This is par for the course. However, people have been noting that other Switch 2 games seem to be more expensive. As you see here, Kirby the Forgotten Land plus Starcross World is $80. And then you also see here Breath of the Wild Switch 2 Edition, $70, Mario Party Jamboree, $80, Tears of the Kingdom, $80. So what gives here? I just explained that Mario Kart 8 is the only $80 game. Well, the thing about Switch 2 Edition games is that all they are is a Switch game with a Switch 2 Edition upgrade pack included. And so if the original Switch game is still $60 and there's a $10 upgrade, that Switch 2 Edition is going to be $70, or in the case of Tears of the Kingdom, it's a $70 game with a $10 upgrade, it would be $80. Or let's take a look at Kirby and the Forgotten Land. It's a $60 game with a $20 upgrade because not only is it getting visual and performance enhancement, it also includes an expansion story adventure, basically like a significant DLC. And for the sake of clarity, different people have been reaching out to the My Nintendo Store team, and on more than one occasion we've already seen that they are telling people that the Switch 2 editions will include the Switch 1 game and the upgrade pack in one single physical cartridge. But because the Switch 2 editions are comprised of these two components here, there's actually a cheaper way to get some of these Switch 2 edition games. So because these games have been around for a while, even though the suggested retail price may be at $60 or $70, if you look at different retail sites, you might be able to find it for cheaper. Like for example, at Walmart, you can actually save $10 on Breath of the Wild. Or Tears of the Kingdom, actually you can save even more. The game is normally $70, but here they're selling it for as low as $53.87. Kirby and the Forgotten Land, you can buy it for about $50 as opposed to the typical $60. And even Mario Party Jamboree, the most recent game, you can buy for a little bit cheaper than usual, $54.99. And so you can still get the physical versions of these games, save a little bit of money, and if you want to get the Switch 2 edition upgrades, you can. But something else people have been very frustrated with is that these different Switch 2 edition games, these Switch 2 enhancements, are something you have to pay for. There are a lot of PlayStation and Xbox games that see enhancements on the current gen platforms, and they're just free upgrades. But there's actually a little bit of confusion there. So Nintendo's actually doing the same thing. As you see here on Nintendo's official Japan website, here are several Switch games that have already been announced to be getting visual and performance enhancements. ARMS, Captain Toad, Mario Odyssey, Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, and more. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. And so all these games are getting free upgrades. And then we also have the Switch 2 editions of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, which are actually getting more significant work done here, and they will be made available for free for Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack members. So if you already have Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, they are not going to cost $70 or $80, they will be totally free with Switch Online. And if you don't have them, as I just pointed out, you can find cheaper versions of these games for Switch 1, and then once you have Switch Online expansion pack, you can get the upgrades for free. And so when it comes to Switch 2 editions, they are actually a separate thing from just games getting some enhancement patches. There will be a growing list of those games getting improvements. But the Switch 2 editions are something that are meant to be a little bit more significant, where there'll be more of a bigger remaster, or there'll be new content added. And if there's significant new content being added, like in the case for Kirby and the Forgotten Land and Mario Party Jamboree, it's essentially like paying for a DLC expansion. But on the note of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom Switch 2 edition, let's talk about the advantages of Nintendo Switch Online now, because there is something very interesting going on here. So Nintendo announced that yeah, there will be some Switch 2 edition games that you can get for free with NSO Plus Expansion Pack, which is the higher tiered version of Nintendo Switch Online. But also they announced that they are changing the name for a Switch Online library to Classic Games, and now it includes GameCube games, and some of these will be available day one. This is also for expansion pack members. So they've increased the value of the expansion pack tier. But then on top of that, they are also integrating game chat into the system. So now voice chat is standard for the Switch 2, and it comes with some extra bells and whistles, screen sharing. You can attach different cameras so you can share your own face while you're communicating with your friends, playing different games, showing off what you're doing, they're showing off what they're doing. And this works for all versions of Switch Online, the more expensive tier and the cheaper tier. And while Game Chat will eventually require a Switch Online membership of some kind, they are going to have an open access period where until March 31st of 2026, you can take advantage of Game Chat on your Switch without having an online membership. And so what I find interesting about this particular situation is that I was actually expecting Nintendo to increase the price for Switch Online, but they did not. They simply added more to Switch Online, and they are maintaining their current pricing model. And for those that don't know what that is, you have the basic Switch Online service, which is $20 a year, or you have the expansion pack service, which is $50 a year. So with the basic service, you get standard online play, you will get the game chat that Nintendo's now adding, as well as these different classic games you can play, Nintendo Music, Save Data Cloud Backup, access to the online app, and some special offers, However, other things like N64, Game Boy Advance, some free DLC packs as you see here, and now GameCube Online and Switch 2 Edition games, that's for expansion pack members. However, there is a way to save more if you get the family plan. So with the family plan, as opposed to for being just one person, you can be up to 8. And so for the family plan, it's $35, less than double for 8 people as opposed to 1. And then as opposed to $50, it's $80, also less than double for 8 people. So if you can get 8 people in there and divvy it up for each other, you actually could pay for the expansion pack for just $10 a year. And so at $10 a year, with everything that Nintendo is now offering and still building upon, I would actually argue this is a pretty good value. It's significantly cheaper than what's being offered everywhere else. But not many people take advantage of the family plan discounts. Well, let's now move on to another interesting announcement about the Switch 2, Gameshare. So this is a new service, or rather the return of an old service, where you can take your games and share them with other people who do not have them. So on Switch 2, there will be certain games where you can share them with others and that person will not need to buy them. And this is not just for local play, but also online as well. You can share it with online people and take advantage of Nintendo's new game chat service. And what's also neat, you can share it with people if it's a Switch 1 game, with people who haven't even gotten a Switch 2 yet. They can still play those games on Switch 1 without having purchased the game. But in the case of Switch 1, this can only be done locally. Online is Switch 2 exclusive. So there are actually a lot of different multiplayer games like Mario Party where some people might feel they need to buy a game if they want to play it online with their friend, but thanks to Gameshare, that is no longer needed. So my friend has Mario Party Jamboree. Once Switch 2 comes out, I will not need to pick it up if I want to play with him online, and I can save myself money from buying the game. But another interesting new feature that's being added that people are overlooking a little bit here is the virtual game card. This applies to both Switch 2 and Switch 1. And the big thing about this is that you can lend games to members in your Nintendo account family groups. Remember how we were talking about the family plan? If you have more people in there and you're sharing the price of the service, it's actually a lot cheaper than any other online service everywhere else. You can also lend people your digital games for 14 days at a time, and you keep the save data so you can actually borrow it again immediately afterwards, or just eventually buy the game if that's what you choose to do. There are no real limitations to letting people borrow certain games here, and so if your friend or family member isn't playing a game for a little while, they can let you borrow that game. If you're in the same family plan, you can beat the game, and you will never actually need to pay for the game yourself. And so what's interesting about what's going on is that Nintendo has actually been building in different services where there are ways to save. They are not the same as before. Nintendo used to have the gold points in the voucher program, but between Gameshare and lending games through virtual game card, not as many people are going to need to buy as many games. Another new component to the overall Switch 2 situation are game key cards. If you don't know what a game key card is, it essentially is just a cartridge that you can put into your Switch 2, so you can buy like the case of a game. It'll come with a cartridge, it'll look very much like a game. However, with the game card in there, as opposed to your typical cartridge, it will allow you to download the game onto your console. So the game's not actually in the cartridge. And a lot of people have been very upset by this. Firstly, because there was some confusion on if this would be all Switch 2 games, and that is absolutely not the case. The great majority of Switch 2 games that come physically will have a cartridge and the entire game will be on there. There will, however, be some cases, a minority of the time, where a game key card will be used instead. But objectively speaking, this is actually an improvement over what it was. So on Switch 1, there were a lot of games where you could buy the case and open it up and there would just be like a download code. And so basically, there was very little point to buying that unless you really just want to collect the case. You wouldn't actually have the game, there'd be no resale value there. And so many people did not like that, but it was a little bit of a necessity for some developers who were unable to fit their games onto the cartridges because either A, their games were too big to fit onto the Switch cartridges, or their game was so big that they weren't unable to fit it onto a cartridge size that was affordable for the developer. And so basically, in some ways, it's a bit of a necessary evil here that you will have to download some games on your console because some games, quite frankly, are too large to fit into cartridges. And so with the introduction of game keycards, this actually fixes the situation a little bit, because if you read here, however, like regular physical software, the game keycard must be inserted into the system in order to play the game. And so what we understand about this is that basically, when you put the game keycard into your console, that allows you to download the game onto your console, and you need the game keycard in there to play the game. However, you can then take out that game keycard, you will no longer be able to play the game as if it was just basically a normal game, and you can plug it into another console that's owned by someone else, and they can then download and play the game. In other words, the game keycard is effectively just like another physical game. The only difference is that there's a download that has to be done. And when you consider modern games in general, where installs are needed before even playing the game, this is essentially the same thing. And really, these game keycards are an advantage over the Switch 1 situation because you can lend these, trade these, or sell these. So if you buy a game keycard for a game and you're done with it, you can sell it back or give it to someone else. And so there can be some savings there. Now, on the note of trade-ins, I would also like to point out that you can trade in your Switch 1 when buying a Switch 2. $450, $500. For many people, that is a lot of money. But if you no longer need your Switch 1, you can go to GameStop, for example, and save a little bit when trading it in for the Switch 2. Now, perhaps you won't want to trade in your Switch 1 because you still want to be able to play games on your Switch 1. Well, fortunately, the Switch 2 is almost nearly fully backwards compatible, both physically and digitally. You can transfer over your saves and have all your games digitally available and your physical games. Now, I say almost because as you see here, technically there is a small amount of games that are not compatible or will have some issues. As you see here, the only game that Nintendo is saying is not compatible from Nintendo themselves is Labo Toy-Con VR Kit. So if you have that, and you want to still be able to play it, then you may want to keep that in mind before trading in your Switch 1 for a Switch 2. And they also here have a list of Switch 1 games that still need to get some updates before they're fully compatible with Switch 2, but it's a small lineup of games. There's a couple that I recognized, but for the most part, as you see from this chart here, a significant percentage of games work on Switch 2, and there's really no issues here. But I will put a link in the description below so you can see the backwards compatibility list, in case you want to make sure that if you do trade in your Switch 1 for a Switch 2, you won't have anything in there that you won't be able to play anymore. But yes, the Switch 2 is over 99% both physical and digital backwards compatible with the Switch 1. And so hopefully, after having gone through all of that, I have cleared up a lot of the confusion about Switch 2, its pricing, and some of its features, and have also provided some different ways to save on the console. But if you have any questions or other ideas on how you can save on Switch 2, let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.